Hey guys, it's Jared. In this video, we're going to be going over how to make an exhaust, an intake, and mount a gas tank to this little engine here. We're going to be taking off this rusty exhaust that I'm pointing at here in the video and replacing it with a new one. We're going to be making the flange, the whole header pipe, and a muffler. So stay tuned. We'll do that. We're going to make an air intake from scratch, and we're going to make some gas tank mounts.
Okay, so we got the original exhaust off the motor that it came with, or at least that I got it with, I should say. Got a piece of plating, about the same thickness here, a little thicker. We'll sand these little nubs off, use this to make a new exhaust flange. Finally found a pen. We're gonna make the exhaust flange. Sorry if the audio is pretty bad, it's pouring outside right now. We're gonna make the exhaust flange slightly bigger than this one. So we're gonna go like that. And I kind of want it to have more room to weld the exhaust on it here. So I'm gonna go a little wider right there, use that whole piece of metal. And we're gonna continue that kind of round shape around the other side. I'll show you guys here when I'm done why I'm doing it kind of like this. Kind of like that. And then take that whole shape there. We'll connect the dots here. That's good. So what I'm gonna do is kind of how this one's made here. It's hard to get to this bolt here. If you can imagine trying to stick a socket down onto that, it doesn't fit. Same with this side over here. So I made it a bit bigger so I have area to weld. And then I also have area to maybe, get a wrench on there better. It'll hold on better. And then I'm gonna make a slot on this side. Because if you look at the engine, there's two bolt holes here and they're both threaded. So if I just make a slot, I can use this outer bolt hole to tighten that on instead, so I can actually get a socket onto it. Okay, so I didn't realize I got a call. My phone stopped recording. This is where we're at with the exhaust flange so far. I got this slotted out, got this hole drilled out, and I started drilling out the center hole, but as you can see, it's slightly off center. So I'm going to go with my Dremel and evenly hollow it out with the sanding wheels. I was using step bits like this to hollow it out, but, like I said, it's off center. And I want one of these pipes that I'm using for the exhaust to fit through there snugly so I can weld it on both sides. Okay, you can see at the end of that last time lapse, I actually ended up switching to my drill, and I ended up putting this little chuck in it to use my sanding wheels. And then I ended up switching to the step bit once I got the hole more shaped the way and place I wanted it. And I ended up smoking one of my step bits out and overheating this metal. So it's real hot to touch right now. I'm going to go cool it down. And that's what I'm talking about right there. It's not flush, but it's just a little bit in. So there's a little gap to weld. Then I can sand it flat. Weld around the outside also. Be like that. And then I'll do a few cuts to get a few little bend. And then this will be on the end as my muffler. And I found this little piece laying in my yard, and it just so happens to fit this perfectly. And I cut this screen out of an old PC computer case. And I'll cut some triangles out of the corners of this to make it fit down onto the pipe, but kind of like a little tiny street bike muffler. So we're going to do a quick little course on the welding of the exhaust. Always wear a welding helmet. Make sure when you're using it, it's not set on grind mode. Make sure it's actually on. Make sure you wear your welding gloves. You're going to want some sort of wire brush. I have a big one and a little one here.
clamps are always helpful. Welding magnets, get that right angle if you ever need it. I got a little silicone mat if I ever need to weld small stuff on top of like a piece of wood or whatever, on top of like a wood table. And to make our exhaust, we just got some random tube that I had laying around, just little chunks of it. And I'm not going to need it to be very long because it's just going on this little tiny pocket bike project, obviously, pocket mini bike. And for our welder, we have the titanium Easy Flux 125. I'm just going to go over a course on how to use this welder. So your voltage is up here in the letters. For this thinner, more mild steel, we're just going to want to keep her down here in the lower range. Probably start on B, see how it likes that steel because it is older metal. And then this is your wire feed. I'm not going to want too much wire feed, so I'm going to turn this down to maybe like a 2 or 3. Start on a 3 with like between a B and a C for the voltage. When you're welding, you also want to make sure you have adequate lighting in your area. It makes it a lot better to see through your welding helmet because they are tinted, obviously. So always make sure your ground is connected to whatever metal you're welding. Me personally, I have this welding table that I made out of a cart. So I have this spot right here that's sanded down. Yeah, you can see that on camera. Sanded down right here. I connect my ground to that. This whole thing is bare metal, so I can just set stuff on top of this to weld. If I didn't have this, I would have to have this ground kit clamp connected to whatever metal piece I'm welding. And then you have your welding gun here. Some welders will have an electrode holder, and you would be holding the electrode holder and welding with a stick if that were the case. Okay, make sure your wire is coming out at an adequate pace. I always like to keep a pair of snips down so I can snip that little piece off. Keep a little bit out. There we go. Keep a little bit out so that you can have a little bit of vision of what you're doing. If I get a little different sounding, it's because I'm wearing my welding helmet. If you're welding with this welder, just like any other welder, you're going to want to kind of go in a back and forth pattern between the two pieces of metal. Make sure your metal is clean when you're welding. It helps it stick a lot better and hold a lot better. Helps the metals bond, I should say, is the adequate terminology there. So something I missed going over in my little teaching segment here is when you're welding on thinner metals, you kind of want to move around between places and don't just weld in one spot continuously because overheating the metal can make it weak and you'll start popping holes through the metal while you're welding. So just keep in mind that you want to move from side to side in kind of like a crisscross pattern if you're going in a circle, or if you're on like a straight line, just kind of go like 4 inches down every time and throw a little bead every 4 inches and do it that way. That way you're not overheating your metal and you're not as likely to punch holes through that metal with your welding wire. Going up to a little bit above a C, and I went down on my wire feed to a 2. Help that metal sink together a little bit better. Okay, so here's what we ended up with. I threw 2 tack welds on the inside of the pipe just for extra stability, and threw a weld around here. I'm not too worried about it looking pretty. Obviously, it's a rat rod build. I'm clean it up with this wire brush a little bit here. There we go. Still a little dirty, but all right. So all I'm going to do is basically go around with a grinder and kind of clean up the edge of this around here, around where the bolts mount basically. Just they have a flush mounting surface. And then I'm going to hit with my orbital sander the bottom of this just to make sure that's as flush and smooth as possible on the bottom. Here's what we ended up with. Both bolts have a nice spot to go through and mount and such. Then I got a nice smooth mounting surface here to mount to the engine. That is bare metal. Okay, so we got the exhaust back off the pocket BMX mini bike thing that we're building here. So I got a black line right here. Exhaust would be this way. Got a black line right here marking where the exhaust is when it's level on the bike. So then I can have it cut. I'm going to cut triangles out of it here. It's called pie slices. That way I can bend this into a 90 degree so it'll come out the back. And I might end up cutting another triangle out here if I need it to get more angle. But I do think this will be about good, so I'm going to cut these 3 pie cuts out, and we'll get back to you when that's done. Right here, we do the pie cuts like I was explaining. We cut those first 3 out to get it to do that backwards bend towards the back of the bike. And then I do another one on the bottom of the pipe that I didn't have drawn in that little segment to get it to point downward. Okay, so we got the exhaust all pie cut and ready to weld. I cleaned up all the joints and stuff with my grinder at the end of that time lapse. So for this, where there's a large gap between each section, we're going to be turning up the wire feed on this. We'll have the heat up a little higher too, because this is a pretty thick steel right here for having it a little low. So we'll probably have it turned up to about a C. And we'll probably go up to about a 4 or maybe a 4.5 for wire feed. Just a little side note for the welding on this header pipe right here, I ended up going with a B for the voltage setting, and I ended up switching between a 4 and a 5 depending on how big the gap was in the spot I was welding. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so after welding and grinding, here's what we have. Not the prettiest thing ever, but it will function as intended. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of hold this here and see what we're thinking for our tailpipe here. So I'm gonna shorten this probably to where it's about 4 inches long. I don't want it huge, obviously, um, and probably have it to where this pipe comes in the side here, like this, and that should work best for me. In this little segment here, I'm basically cutting the pipe down to that 4 inches, like I said. I'm cutting triangles out of it, kind of the same idea as the pie cuts, but I'm doing it so I can fold the leftover metal down into the pipe itself and weld it onto the header, like you see me doing right here. Okay, so here's what we got now. We got the pipe welded on, baffle in there, and it'll sit right there. I'll clean up these welds and put it on there and show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so we got our exhaust done. I heated it up with a torch and then I coated the whole thing in oil, or dunked it in oil, whatever you want to say, to give it that black look with a little bit of coloring there. Mainly just to keep it from rusting was my main idea. I don't know how well that's going to work, but that was the idea behind it. Keep it from rusting. There's some metal chunks down in there. It's still pretty hot, so I can't really touch it right at the moment. But once it cools down, I will pop up a video of it on the bike. Here's the exhaust slash muffler. Got her to fit pretty snugly up against the bike here. As you can see, there's about a finger width of room between each area, kind of like I was going for. I was wanting it to fit pretty good up in here. Not touching any throttle linkages or anything. Next step after the exhaust is we're going to be doing the intake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure between the 2 bolts here, or the outside of the 2 bolts, I suppose. And I'm going to cut out a plate from this piece of sheet metal. Used to be the side of a PC case. It is steel though, so we're going to cut out a circle out of that, and we're going to cut a section off this about like that. Weld the two together, weld the screen into this. That way I can put some air filter material in there. I ended up ditching that dual screen idea for the air filter. I ended up going with a simpler method for attaching a air filter to the end of the tube. Okay, so we got the intake done. Basically, like I said, just took one of those tubes, same tube that I used for the exhaust here, welded a piece of plate metal to the back of it, cut the holes adequately for the bolts for the carb, and an intake hole for the actual airflow for the carb. And then I took a single screen instead of, like I was saying with the dual screen, I took a single screen and just pressed the filter material right up to the butt of this tube, and it should just filter better than it was because there was no air filter on it when I got it and it was running like that. So this should be better than it was, and we'll test it out, I suppose. Okay, so next we're going to be mounting a gas tank. We got this half-gallon gas tank off a Tecumseh 3.5 horse motor here. Petcock comes out over here. I am going to mount it, yeah, like so. So still a little bit of gas in there. Yep. So it's going to be right above the carburetor here. I don't want it too far forward because I want to be able to take the spark plug boot off without removing the gas tank, because that would be really irritating having to remove the gas tank every time we want to check the spark plug or whatnot. So I'll probably use this bolt here on top of the side cover, and then there's a bolt hole here on the back of the engine that I'll also use, and I will build basically an L bracket between the two, and then I will build two brackets off of that coming up to each bolt on top of this gas tank, and that will be what holds it, and it will be plenty sturdy. I've done it on other mini bikes with bigger gas tanks before. Should be absolutely fine. Okay, so we got the gas tank mounted to the engine. Spin this around for you guys. Mounted right like so. Fuel line going down, just in a little S. Real rugged mounted to it. I'm going to throw a little gas in it, see if I can get to fire up on the bench here. Luckily, after doing a little troubleshooting, I did end up getting the motor running. It does need a carb clean really bad, but it does run and idle as is. It just bogs at the higher RPM. So we'll probably do a little carb clean and mess with the jetting a little bit, see if we can get a little more horsepower out of this engine. Okay, well, runs. Okay, so now that we got the exhaust, the intake, and the gas tank all mounted and built, we can actually mock them up onto the bike and see how they're fitting on here. Obviously, I've been kind of keeping an eye on how they fit throughout building them, but this is just a cautionary thing to make sure everything is going to fit as intended. I'm missing the actual key for the master link, so this is just going to hold it together for now for um, mounting purposes, and I'll get a new master link when I actually plan on riding it. Good. And so the wheel has tensioners, and the motor also slides back and forth. That way, I have as much chain movement as possible to get it as tight as possible. We're just gonna try to. The engine does pivot a little bit, so I just want to try to get that chain as lined up as best as possible. Okay, here's what we have going for our throttle cable. Got it going from the twist grip up there, down the bike, through the first eyelet right there. And then we got it connected right there with the connector nut. Then we have an actual nut welded to the frame holding this eyelet. Then it goes down the frame there, around up to the throttle linkage on the back. So wrapping up today's video, we got the exhaust made from scratch. Made the whole flange, the header pipe, the muffler, and everything. We got the intake made right here from scratch also. Also got a gas tank mounted. We made our mounts from scratch. The gas tank is off a Tecumseh 3.5 horse. Got the engine mounted to the frame. Got the chain on. We needed a master link for it still missing this half of the master link key. We got our throttle cable mounted, and it's a dual throttle cable because I didn't have one that was long enough. So in the next video, we will get the brake cables for the front and the back disc brakes. We'll also get brake handles for the front, for the rear brakes. Actually, we already have a handle for the front brakes. And we will clean the carburetor, get it running better. Maybe do a little jetting depending on how it's running after the carb clean. And we'll get a master link. And then she'll finally be ready for a test drive, and we'll do a little top speed run. Maybe do a little 5-mile trip, see how well it runs long term. So please like and subscribe, and look forward to more content.